And welcome back. This is Alem for another video. This one in particular has to do with Milestone 5, and I'll also comment on a few updates that occurred in a post-Milestone 4 mid-milestone update since my last video, which has some important information. All of this information will be timestamped, so feel free to skip ahead or select whatever parts that are of interest to you. So we'll start off here with the introduction. The first one will go through all the new designs for the buildings that they have in place. Then we'll look into the changes to the weapons, the damage, the attack speeds. Next we'll go into some mob AI changes in addition to some mob AI things that need to be changed still, and we'll have a video on that. A big update is they have the Gala token now integrated into the game, and you can actually spend the Gala tokens. A major part of Milestone 5 is the addition of a repair system, and that's based off of durability loss to both weapons and armors. And there is a kind of like a secret area that was introduced towards the end of the last milestone, which has some slight changes in this version, but I show a video of that and I try not to spoil all the details on how to get there. They've added some more character models, and the final character models will be coming fairly soon. We also have a bunch of new UI changes to accommodate all the new features. They've done some rebalancing of many things, including the cost of all the ways to restore your health. Of course, with all these changes, there's some new combat strategies to fully take advantage of them, and I'll go over that. And then, as per the norm, I'll finish off with some final thoughts to kind of review the main points and to see what would be beneficial going forward. Alright, so our first slide here, new building interior designs. So up until this most recent milestone, the vast majority of the 10x10 buildings were essentially empty and all look the same. And this update has provided interiors to all buildings that are currently in the game. The quality of these I don't find are quite on the same level as the 5x5s though. For a 10x10 you would expect a lot more kind of stuff, but they're reusing quite a bit of the same textures. After this slide here, there's a video that we'll go over that reviews all the various buildings. Another thing to note is, although they've updated all the buildings currently in the game, there are many more buildings of both smaller sizes, the 10x10s, and larger sizes that exist as NFTs that are not yet in the game. So I'm unsure if all of those buildings have been updated as well, but we'll find out soon enough. And all the buildings that were updated all happen to be in the Village of the Earl. And here we are entering the Village of the Earl, and in front of us here we have the large cemetery. So there hasn't been really any significant changes here. And we'll come around to our first 10x10. The large cemetery was a 10x20, and this is the temple. And the temple has had some non-cosmetic adjustments, such as the actual cost of restoration. We'll go into that a bit later. Coming down the most southern street of the Village of the Earl, we'll first have a stop into the Outfitter, which is a 10x10 cloth or tailoring shop. And as you can see, we have a bunch of various cloth and stuff. It'd be nice if there were maybe some additional colors and such, but we can definitely tell it's an outfitter. Here we have the tannery, and we can see some leathers being tanned. Again, they're all fairly on the bland side. Some reused textures. Otherwise, again, you can tell it's a tannery, but not particularly exciting. This is the mid-street in the Village of the Earl, and this is a butchery. We see some various foods, some sausages, looks like some turkey and some meat, so clearly a butchery. Coming to the next one, we have the archery, and the archery has things that you'd expect of archery. You have some bows. Unfortunately, they're all the same bows, and we have a little target there. Be nice to have a little more depth there as well. The wood shop has all of the current wooden weapons, and we also have some metallic weapons which are not currently in the game, so they might be coming in the not too distant future, given the models already exist. large forge is our first newly designed 10x20. We can see some armors there. We see a nice anvil on the fire. We also see a bunch of shields and stuff which are not currently in the game. So that's interesting to see. I do know they're in the game file, so hopefully it won't be too much longer and we'll actually see shields in the game. Next is the 10x20 tavern, the large tavern, and you can see some food, some good old gruel, which is probably not the most appetizing, but it restores your stamina quite well, or your energy in this case. One thing I would say, it'd be nice if there was actually some seats and you could sit down and do things, and potentially some drinks and stuff in the tavern. It otherwise seems rather bland. The next thing is with weaponry balancing. So I had on my previous video, I was mentioning how the spear was very overpowered. And essentially there was never a reason to use anything other than the spear. And that's changed. So all of the weapons now are useful in various situations. For example, the sword is good against mobs that are weak to slash. However, previously, even if a mob was weak to slash, the sword didn't do enough DPS to justify it over the spear. Now it actually does. Sword, as you can see from the bottom, does 7 average DPS, but against a target that's weak to slash damage, it would do 50% more than that, so 10.5. So you can see that's a significant improvement. The dagger, in addition to the hammer and sword, have all had their swing timers much faster, so they've doubled the swing timers to be consistent with the spear. And the dagger also does pierce damage, but does more overall DPS than the spear. So, well, the advantage of the spear is it has significantly longer range than the dagger, meaning that if you're running in to attack mobs, you can get more uptime DPS on the target because you can start attacking them from further away, whereas the person with the dagger would still have that time to run up to them to actually hit the target while you're already doing damage. Now, that balances out in longer fights. For example, let's say that we were fighting a boss mob and the boss mob wasn't moving around a whole lot. Then the person that could just stay on the boss mob with the dagger would eventually out DPS the little bit of additional lead time DPS that the spear got. The spear also, because of its longer range, means that you can kite mobs more effectively, meaning that you don't take quite as much damage. So between the dagger and the spear, for the most part, I would probably run the spear in general, with the exception of that one example I've given. Now the hammer is the same DPS as the dagger, but does crush damage. So if you're fighting mobs that are weak to crush damage, the hammer will absolutely destroy them. So definitely use the hammer in such cases. And if you're wondering which mobs are weak to what, you can simply just watch some of my previous videos. I go over all the details of mob weaknesses, resistances, damage taken, etc. Also, as you can see here, I have highlighted in yellow the most effective of every single attribute. Overall, the hammer wins out for maximum damage, maximum DPS, and overall average DPS. Plus, it's the only weapon that does crush damage. So if I were to choose one weapon, I would probably choose the hammer at this point. Although myself personally, I like the spear so much that I would still probably just use the spear. Next we have some mob AI changes, and they've done a few things. So first off, the last milestone, mobs would quite frequently walk into the air, sometimes even out of range of your attacks, and then they would end up even getting stuck in the air or be able to attack you from up high, etc. I've still seen that in this build, although it is significantly less. I've also noticed that they've greatly improved the Wisp's mesh and its interaction with the environment. Previously, the Wisp was getting stuck more often than they was not getting stuck. Now he's quite consistent overall in avoiding obstacles and making it to where he wants to go. They still have some issues with regards to getting stuck, and you can see this image here, there's 3 goblins kind of all stuck together, and what happened there was a mob that they were going to aggro onto, and the mob got out of their range, and they kind of glitched out, and I guess they lost their pathing. This can also happen if a mob dies. It can also happen if the alpha buck spawns nearby, etc. And the alpha buck I had in a previous video that showed that specific behavior, and as of the present I haven't seen that change. Another thing you'll see in this upcoming video is that the mobs now can attack you in areas that were previously safe. So let's say you're up higher on something, the archers can still hit you with arrows now. If you're up a bit higher but not out of the range of, say, the weapons that the goblins have, their halberds or whatever, they can also hit you even in places that were safe, like on top of cemeteries, etc. So the AI has been updated and it's significantly better at this point. A bit annoying at the same time because you can't as easily go AFK without dying. Now in this video we can see the yellow goblin attacking us, and I'm at almost the absolute top of this cemetery, which is previously a completely safe zone as soon as you enter the steps. You can see that he can't hit me now. Next up we have is the Gala token integration, which is something that's been a long time coming. So first off, in the screenshot to the top right, you can see when you first log in, your default is set to essentially have an unlimited amount of Gala tokens that can be burned for in-game spending. Myself personally, I don't like to know that my entire wallet balance is at risk at all points in time, so if you want to adjust that, you can go into your account settings via account and then click on token burn allowances, and you can set your Gala tokens and your Materium tokens that are on Gala chain to be set at whatever number you want to have as your burn allowance. And when you then log back into the game, you'll notice that what you see in the bottom left corner, so I set mine at 1,000 for Gala tokens, and now it was set at 1,000. Now you're probably saying, why was it $9.99? Well, I also repaired one item just to test that it was working, and that dropped me down to $9.99. So once you set your token allowance, the amount of Gala tokens that it shows in game will be the amount up to your maximum token allowance, as opposed to your total amount of tokens that you have on Gala chain. So that's an important note. So if you suddenly notice that you have less tokens than you actually have, it doesn't mean that those tokens disappeared. It just means that you don't currently have access to burn them while actively playing the game. Next, we have their huge system that was implemented, the Armor Weapon Durability System, which of course is related to the repair system. So I've made a few interesting things here. So first off, on the right we see a chart. And what I did is I did actually multiple tests, but specifically a test with only one wolf attacking me, with me not doing anything, literally just standing there letting the wolf attack me. And I waited for 4 minutes by timing it with a stopwatch. I checked my durability on all of my armor pieces prior to engaging in combat, and then checked the durability upon ending combat, which was at the 4-minute mark, and recorded the durability loss, and then of course divided by the total duration, which was 4 minutes. Upon doing this, I noticed that there were significant changes in the rate of durability loss. So your leggings and your boots lose durability much faster than your chest piece. Yet the cost to repair all of your items is the same, meaning that despite your leggings and your boots providing you with less additional armor than, say, the chest piece, they actually cost you more to maintain, which is somewhat counterintuitive. I don't think it should work really that way because it just doesn't make sense, but it's not such a bad system once you're actually using it. Now, the images in the bottom right there, we see a wooden spear which has 29% durability, and then we see a wooden spear that has 0% durability. And we'll see from a video here in a bit that when an item has 0 durability, such as the wooden spear, you can't just repair it with the normal repair powder. You have to actually use Gala tokens or simply replace the item. And considering it only costs 1 Gala token, which is like a penny right now, to repair an item, it's not such a bad thing. The other thing is these wooden spears and other wooden weapons are very cheap. They're only 2 pine. So if you have a bunch of pine on you, you can easily just junk the item and equip a new one if you so desired. Of note, all items start with a base durability of 100, and if you stand there and let yourself get hit, your first item, the leggings, will break first, and that'll take about 8 minutes of a single mob hitting you. Of course, if you have 2 mobs hitting you, you can double the speed that happens. When an item does break, you get the notification saying that the item is broken. As you can see here, it says item wooden spear is broken. And when the item is broken, say your weapon, you can no longer attack with that weapon. So you simply just hold on to it, and you can't attack at all until you switch a weapon. And weapons themselves, they lose durability, not based on you getting attacked, but you attacking with that weapon. Just swinging the weapon doesn't cause durability loss, but actually hitting a target with it does. And on average, you lose about 1 durability per attack with that weapon. So your durability on weapons declines very, very quickly. So here was a relatively short video of some combat, and the main thing we're looking at here is to see how durability affects it and how you can recover from combat if your weapon breaks. Now, normally I would do things like dodging and stuff. I actually want to be taking damage because I'm testing things, so if you find that my combat skill is really bad, it's actually better than this. I'm literally just trying to show this for purposes of explaining in this video. So my durability right now is down to 1, so my weapon will break right there. So it says the equipped item just broke. So I now have another equipped item. So what I did is I equipped multiple spears in my hotbar spots. So as soon as one weapon broke, I just used the other hotbar spot to equip another weapon. So normally I would have used hotbar spots to equip different kinds of weapons, say like the bow, lantern of the sun, etc. But the absolute worst thing that could happen is if your weapon literally breaks right in the middle of combat and you have to be trying to switch it. It just doesn't work very well. So having multiple the same item equipped in your slots at the same time is beneficial. And if the Eagle provides these additional hotbar spots, which I suspect they probably will, that'll make the Eagle very powerful if you need to equip multiple of the same weapon. And here I'm just checking the amount of loot. They've changed the amount of materia mobs drop as well. And now all the mobs drop materia because you need it for repairs much more than you did previously. So when I switch to that screen, you'll see here I'm down about, like 20%, 25% durability on my new weapon within like a minute there. So on to the next part here, we have armor weapon durability with mob drop changes. So as I mentioned, the mobs can drop different amounts, and on the right hand side here we see a doe. Now a doe previously did not drop test materium, however now all the mobs do. Previously it was just the goblins, the Wisp, and the Alpha Buck. Now the Wisp and the Alpha Buck still drop their huge amounts of materium that they dropped before, however the other mobs have been adjusted somewhat. Another very welcome change is the change on the looting and the loot timers upon mob death. So previously after 30 seconds anyone could loot your mob, which was a little quick, especially if you were in combat. Now that's changed to 90 seconds, so you have a minute and a half to loot that mob before other people can. That's a little harder now for power leveling people though. So previously you could easily power level people. Now power leveling people will be a bit slower because you gotta wait until that mob becomes lootable. The other thing was that mobs were despawning after 60 seconds, and considering how mobs chain pull sometimes, a lot of the times the mobs would despawn before you'd actually get the chance to loot them. So that's been changed to 180 seconds or 3 minutes now, which for the most part is more than adequate in order to loot loot it. I was finding myself personally around the 80 to 90 second mark. It was when the mobs were all dying, and more often than not I wasn't getting the chance to actually loot the mobs that I killed. A very welcome change. And the last part of the armor and weapon durability section is the repairing. So the top image there shows you have options. On the left it says repair with lesser repair power, which only repairs 50% of an item's durability, and that's an absolute 50%. So if an item has 1% durability left and you use that item, it'll go up to 51%, as opposed to say it was at 50% and you use this item, it doesn't go to 75, it would go to 100%. And repair with Gala, you can use one Gala token on Gala chain, which you allocated to be burnt, and that will fully repair the item, and that includes fully repair from broken status. Now, let's say you don't have Gala tokens and you want to repair, you have to make some lesser repair powder. And as it says here, lesser repair powder allows to repair basic weapons and armor by selecting the item you wish to restore. And to get that, you need 15 test material, which is a decent amount early on, and you also need a lesser bone marrow, and these kind of drop from a bunch of different creatures, and they're not all that uncommon. I would say every few kills or so you'll probably see a lesser bone marrow. And given how fast your items degrade between your 3 armor pieces plus your weapons, I think the drop rate on these and the amount of material used is acceptable in terms of balance. Now, in terms of armor and weapons, any armor or weapon that takes durability loss, and so far that seems to be all of them, can be repaired once their durability is under 100. 100 of course being the base amount. The other thing is, and we'll see in the upcoming video here, that if your weapon is, say, completely broken, as in 0 durability, then the only way you can repair it is with Gala tokens themselves. Otherwise, you have to remake your weapon from scratch. And given how easy the early weapons are to make, that's not so much an issue, but let's say this was an ancient tier 18 weapon, you're probably not going to want to let it break, and if you do, you're probably willing to pay the 1 penny to actually repair it. With that said, the amount of test material and bone marrow you get is adequate later on to be self-sufficient. Early on though, using Gala tokens is probably a bit beneficial to you because it's a little harder early on while you're trying to gear up to keep yourself fully repaired. So here's the video of repairing. So the first thing we do is we go to the lesser repair powder, and we craft multiple of those because we have the bone marrows to do so. Once we've completed that, we go to choose some items to see what we want to repair, and first off we want to repair our weapon, but you see it only allows us to repair with Gala, so we press the Gala and the weapon is fully restored. Now the other items are not broken completely, so we can repair them with the repair powder. And we repair all of them. Now you have to currently repair 1 item at a time. I do hope they add some better abilities where you can auto repair. The next thing is quite interesting, and I'm not sure if it's still doable. I haven't tested it in this current build. This came in the very end of Milestone 4 after the last video that I created, and I honestly don't even think that this is intended to be done. In the map on the right, which is the map of Narrow's Landing that I created, I made a little X at the bottom there, and that's where the secret area is. Previously there was a large tree with a big red door. Now that's changed, so now there's actually an opening into the tree, and we'll see that in the video. Once you go inside the tree, there's a way up, so you have to climb on the various roots. Now the roots have repulsion, so staying on the roots is very, very difficult, and there's a couple of kind of safe spots on the way up where there is no repulsion, and I show those in the video, so if you can get to those points, you know you're safe at least to that point. Once you get to the very top, you can clip through the top of the tree out through this door, but you can't clip from outside back into the tree. And the area that you get at the very top has railing around it, and that railing is too high to jump off of, and because you can't jump off and you can't get back into the tree to go down, that means the only way to get out of there is using the unstuck function, which kills yourself, and then you have to go through purgatory and the like. So like I said, I didn't try it specifically in this build, but I do show you what it looks like when you get there in this upcoming video. So here we are going into the tree, which was previously closed off. And we can look up there and we can see a kind of a landing. You see right there, there's a landing. And you can come around and climb up this log, and you can start the jumping puzzle and climb up there along the area up onto that landing. Once you get up to that landing, you're safe. You no longer have things trying to auto knock you off. And then you can go around to the other side and climb up that far side up until where you see that glitched out white area, and there is a big door. And you can see the door here in a little bit, and that brings you up to this platform. And this platform has a very nice view of everything. There you can see the village of the Earl, and there's the door that you come through. Next up, we have the new character models. So the halfling, which is the image on the right, is the new character model. It doesn't look like the Lannister guy from Game of Thrones anymore. This one is probably more relevant. He does look good. He's pretty stealthy looking. I like it. So previously they were using the dwarf model. Now every single race, at least on the male side of things, have their own actual avatar models. And in the bottom left there, they're showing 4 various models as well, and there you see it looks like an elf, a human, an orc, and a dwarf female. I don't see a halfling female, but they are working on those models, and I expect they will be coming out sooner rather than later, at which point all the models will be done. And they also of course have all the various armors and weapons appropriately fitting the models as well. So they have made some pretty good progress in this regard. Next up, we have some UI changes. So there's been quite a few UI changes, and that's logical given the amount of systems that have been updated. So on the far right, we see the weapons and the gear, and they have little bars underneath them. Those bars are consistent with the amount of durability remaining on that piece of equipment. And next to that, you see a dialogue. So if you right-click an item in your backpack, you'll have a bunch of options. So you'll have either equip, repair, or potentially delete, depending on what you want to do. The other thing is they now have in the main area just under your paper doll, depending on the item that you have equipped, it'll show the max damage of that item. And in the case of, say, a bow and arrow, it'll show the combined total damage between the bow and the arrow, which is interesting. Now, it does say maximum damage, but that isn't truly the maximum amount of damage you can do. If you're using, say, a spear, which does pierce damage, and you're wearing armor that does additional pierce damage, and let's say the mob is also weak to pierce damage, then you can still do twice that amount of damage to that mob. So that's the max amount of base damage, not actual maximum damage. And in this video here, what we're going to show first is we equipped some bandages, and they overwrote and maxed out the maximum amount for that slot. And you can equip 100 bandages in a stack. And auto-equipping another item replaces your first hotbar slot. Now you see I moved that food over and equipped it, and then the food then stacked with the other slots. So this is a welcome change. Also, you can see the various armors, and to equip them, before you could just right-click them, which was very fast to switch armors. Now you have to right-click and then left-click, so it takes at least twice as long to switch armors as it did before, and in combat that's significant. Here we have the healing cost changes. Now we've seen a lot of rebalancing with this patch, and this is no exception. So the 2 images on the right with the little red plus symbol and the heart. So we have partial heal auto consume and full heal auto consume. And the partial now uses 5 materium, and the full uses 10 materium. And you can use this at the temple. Previously, the partial heal was 30 materium and the full heal was 50 materium, which was completely completely illogical because it only healed you and it didn't restore your energy at all. Yet it was better actually just to die and repair that way. So these adjusted materium values are more in line and they're actually worth actually using now. So another welcome change. Also, when you're in purgatory, and this is the top left image, the free resurrection, free in terms of materium at least, you still have to pay in terms of waiting, but that's increased from 50% health up to 75% health. However, the amount of energy restoration remains at 50%. This again keeps in line with all of the other things that we're noticing in terms of the decreased overall cost of healing. So, with all of these changes, and anytime there's any significant amount of changes, you have new strategies that you can use in combat. So, the one strategy you can see on the far right there is simply filling all of your inventory slots with the same weapon. So, as soon as one breaks, you got another one immediately in combat. You essentially have zero downtime, which, as silly as that sounds, is quite effective. Having your weapon break and not having a replacement of some form is not going to... You may not die because you can run away, but you're unlikely to complete that combat scenario unless you completely overpower the mobs in the first place. As we mentioned with the armor, now that it takes multiple clicks to swap it, you're much more strategic in when you're going to equip what armors and which kind of mobs you're going to be fighting. And they're really leaning towards that, where you have to plan in advance what it is you're going to do to be effective at combat. And I very much like that strategy. It's very min-maxy, and as someone who min-maxes everything to the absolute maxima, I definitely like the direction they're going in. Another thing is repair powders. Unless you're going to be spending Gala, you're going to want a healthy supply of repair powders on hand at all times, or at least once you have enough build up so that you can afford to do it. Early on, you're going to have some issues with trying to get enough materium and the bone marrow to keep them adequately stocked, especially when you don't have the armor to withstand the blows from the enemies, but this will balance out as you're more geared. Another thing that I don't particularly like, however, about this build is Vox. So previously, for Vox, you could just cursor over them and then press delete and enter, and it would get rid of them very quickly. Now when you try to delete them, it opens up a dialog box to confirm that you actually want to delete it. And this doesn't actually delete your Vox, it just removes it temporarily from the inventory. Every time you die or relog in, your Vox that you deleted will be back in your inventory. And if you have a lot of Vox, this gets really annoying really quickly. Like for myself personally, I have enough Vox to fill my entire inventory, and I spend like several minutes every time I die and log in just deleting Vox. If they could make that so that's not the case, would be amazing. Ideally, the system would be designed in a way so the only Vox that are showing up in your inventory are the Vox that you can equip on that particular exemplar, whether it be an animal Vox that can be equipped on any exemplar, or exemplar specific Vox, or potentially even a third tab where it says inventory then NFTs. Having a Vox tab would potentially help with that as well. The other thing is you got to be careful. Forget to delete your Vox and then you go into combat and you're trying to loot mobs and you can't loot anything, just to find out that your inventory slots are all full because you didn't delete your Vox. And I've had that happen several times as well. Alright, so some final thoughts. Well, I've gone over quite a few topics in this video, and that's simply directly proportional to the amount of new content that we've been provided. And literally every 2 to 4 weeks we're getting a significant content update, which is quite aggressive. And honestly, at this rate, we could have quite a decent game in the not too distant future if they were able to maintain this rate. So first off, I'll run over some of the main points here. So the buildings, the updates to the building are nice. Having that additional depth makes the game feel much more complete. With that said, the tavern not being able to go and sit down seems kind of silly, and it does feel like these buildings were a bit rushed. They're certainly not on the same par as the 5x5s. Like the 5x5s are 1/4 the size of 10x10s, yet some of the 5x5s actually have more stuff in them than the 10x10s. Even the 10x20s, like say the 10x20 tavern, some of the 5x5 stands actually have more stuff than the full 10x20 tavern that's 8 times the size. So that's, again, somewhat illogical. With regards to the weapons, I very much like what they've done there. They've made most of the changes actually that I was mentioning. All of the weapons are now useful. I personally probably just use the spear, but if you want to be really worthwhile and fully min-max, and certainly if earnings were actually involved at this point, I would be using all of the different weapons. An issue comes then with weapon slots though, because the weapons break so quickly. The mob AI changes are looking really good. It makes sense that they can now attack you pretty much anywhere. There is that slight annoyance that you can't really go AFK like you could, but there's nothing stopping you from just logging out, so it's no real excuse. The Gala token integration is huge. It works very, very well, very smooth, very slick. I have really no comment other than saying good job in that regard. The durability system is quite nice as well, and the way that it works. The rate of durability loss, at least on the weapons, I think is somewhat excessive. The other thing is having some kind of priority system where you can set it so anything that has 50% durability buffer, you can automatically use a repair powder, and also to have it so that you can repair all items, whether that be all items in your backpack and equipped, or just the equipped items, instead of having to go through and select one item at a time, which is somewhat cumbersome and not terribly convenient. The secret area is quite interesting. That was originally the Splinterlands teleporter area, and given that there looks like there's a big platform on the top, I kind of envision there being like a dragon that swoops in and brings you to, say, a different zone. I am interested to see what direction they're going there, and I do suspect, like I said, that that area is not intended to be visited yet, but it was still nice to finally get up there, which took a significant period of time, to say the least. The amount of content depth is looking good. We definitely need more weapons, we still need more armors, we need magic, we need combat systems like abilities, positioning, critical hits, etc, etc. So there's still a lot to build out in terms of the combat system, but it's definitely looking good. Overall, progress is looking really, really good. I'm a little disappointed that they're kind of backburnered deeds though. As someone who's been in here for 4 years now, and being the first items I purchased and the first things that got me interested in Mirandus were the deeds, the fact that they've kind of stopped even making the layouts of the deeds as opposed to even considering the placement is, like I said, disappointing. So I hope they kind of move forward in that direction. Other than that, looking quite good, and hopefully they continue on the rate they're going and the game comes along nicely. Looking forward to the next update.